stunning, beautiful people. How are you? Let's choose our angel card together. Close your eyes. This is our shared vibe. Can you feel it? I can feel it. The air is electric. Wisdom. It's an angel on top of mountains with a lantern. Wisdom. Well, I can't wait for you to hear the wisdom that our guest is going to impart to us today. He is a man who is as inspiring as he is hilarious. But first, I want to check in because it's the holidays. The holidays. A lot comes up at the holidays, doesn't it? It's clear from many conversations I've had recently that loneliness is this unspoken pandemic. And the holiday seems to act as a magnifier of grief, of loss, of regrets, of what could have been, of what we wish things were. A lot of people had straight up traumatizing holidays when they were younger. Lack of holidays, families who ignored the holidays, families that were incredibly abusive and unhappy, where the holidays were just a nightmare. Yeah, the holidays mean something different for every one of us. Whether you are alone or with family, I think there's a lot that goes on under the surface. And it's strange to think that you could be lonely when you've got a lot of family around you and you're having a good time. But just check in with yourself. I thought about it for me and realized that Thanksgiving is a day where a lot of grief comes up for me. I've had 5 loved ones die on that day or right around it over the past 20 years. My boyfriend Andrew in high school, my keyboardist Jason, my grandfather, and my 2 friends Ryan and Max. So that's a tough one for me. I didn't realize until now that I hold my breath around then. So it's interesting to think about. I guarantee there's stuff going on under the surface for you. So be gentle. Be gentle with ourselves. And I think a big part of being an adult is getting to redefine what life gets to be for you. So maybe it's time to redefine some things about your holiday traditions and experience. If you don't have a positive, loving family experience at the holidays, maybe find ways to nourish yourself and take care of yourself that make you feel good. I spoke to a man who said that his tradition now, or what he was going to be doing for himself this year on Thanksgiving, was going to yoga and then going to his favorite deli and having a great meal. He has a lot of trauma around that holiday, and so that was his way of self-care on that day. Whatever that might be for you. Maybe it's time to not just go along with long-standing generational traditions that don't really work for you anymore. Maybe you'd like to start incorporating some new personal traditions. Open it up to new possibilities and pay attention to what you need. It's not all about catering to other people and just feeling depleted afterwards. My husband describes when he was younger kind of feeling like he was being passed around like a present because he had divorced parents and had to spend time with one and then go to the other, and he was always torn and traveling and exhausted by the end of it, right? I think that's kind of a common experience. It definitely is for me. I drive to my mom, and then I drive to my dad, and I drive to my stepdad. And it's lovely to see everybody, but by the end of it, my God, I'm absolutely drained. So how can we reclaim that energy? How can we nourish ourselves at the holiday as well? Because it's supposed to be a joyous time where we get to take a little breather from the year you just had, assess what you've accomplished, assess where you're going, replenish your energy. That's the point of winter, is to go inward and rejuvenate. And how can we do that if we are just draining our energy out to everyone around us? It's not really fair. If you do have a big family situation, I definitely will be focusing on compassion and patience, tolerance of other people's personalities and opinions, not needing to be right in every conversation. allowing others to just be and myself to just be, not having to prove anything. Interesting, the dynamics that ignite when you come together, isn't it? So just pay attention. See what you can observe this year in the people around you and in yourself that you hadn't been aware of in the past. That's your joy work this holiday, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, are you ready? I am so excited for this conversation today with Ron DeLancey. I discovered Ron's comedy sketches on Instagram. He has hilarious takes on life after 40 and the mundane things that make us deeply human. And he hits this wickedly comedic sweet spot where we can laugh at life's chaos because we've all been there. You gotta go see it for yourself because his comedy is very visual. You can find his social media links in the show notes for this episode. But in the meantime, take a listen to this little bit he did on this life hack he discovered.
Saving money? Yeah, it was a big problem for me until I found a solution. Pretending has changed my life. I'd always wanted a bike, but it can be an expensive hobby. With Pretend, I can ride around town all day, wind blowing through my hair, and not miss anything. My friends always invite me to go somewhere nice for dinner. With Pretend, I can go anywhere and get anything that I want. Filet mignon? I'll have 2.
Pretend is a state of mind not recommended for most. Side effects may include loss of friends, inflated ego, and disconnection from reality altogether.
This? No, it's not just a glass of water. It's a glass of Chateau Blanc 68. That's earthy.
Pretend can be used at any time, including those times of negative consequences that are directly related to using Pretend.
With Pretend, there's hope. I would recommend it to anyone wanting to try. And if it doesn't work for you, just pretend you didn't do it. Or pretend that it worked. Either way, it's amazing.
Oh my God. I can't. But there's so much more to Ron than just the laughs. He opens up with us today about his personal journey, which is full of transformational takeaways for all of us. Here we go. Yeah, so I've had that anxious energy lately where I just want to throw out everything I look at. You said you've been doing it with your clothes recently?
I kind of have the desire to sometimes, but then I just end up, I made a joke not too long ago about how I kind of wear the same thing all the time. So it's just like, I'm just going to keep my backward hats in rotation. And
Are you a backward hat man?
yeah, I kind of become one. I think that's kind of a requirement as a 40-year-old man. Throw on the backward hat, maybe like a button up, just kind of like the uniform that I have right now.
Exactly what I'm seeing right now.
Yeah.
I saw you had really long hair at one point.
I did. When I got it cut, I had 16 inches cut off.
Oh my God.
And I had been growing it out for 3 years.
Just like as an interesting exercise?
I think so, yeah. And I had never done it before, so I wanted to try something new.
Yeah.
That was when the man bun was kind of a thing. And I was like, maybe I should try a man bun. Maybe I
Did
should
you
just...
do it?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah. And I've always been a fan. Well, I've always loved music in general. I've always been a fan of heavy music too. So it's kind of playing guitar, yeah, headbanging a little bit.
Wow. Well, Ron DeLancey, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm so thrilled to have you and just to get to know you. We've never spoken before, and I hit record right when we got on the call so that the listeners can go on this journey with us of getting to know you. I discovered you recently because of your beautiful, brilliant comedy on social media. I discovered you on Instagram. I don't remember what video it was, but on Instagram, you've got 233,000 followers. And on TikTok, you've got 168,000 followers, and you've got 6 million likes. I noticed a change in your social media. To be specific, it was like around October, September of 2023, where your social media went from a pretty regular looking grid to all of a sudden these sketches. I don't know what you call them, but like these comedy sketches. And I was just wondering what happened around that time that caused that shift into the straight up comedy.
Well, it's yeah, sketch comedy is how what I would refer to it as. And it's something that I've enjoyed doing my entire life. And around that time, I left my position where I had worked retail management for about 10 years. And I was kind of a shell of a person towards the end of that. It was giving me extreme anxiety, it's giving me health problems. So there was the point to make the decision to practice self-care and come to the realization that this is not a lifestyle that I want to live.
What company were you with, if you don't mind saying, or is it?
It was no, I don't mind at all. Kroger company, grocery retail, and I'll take a step back. We were living in Arizona at the time. We had moved from West Virginia to Arizona in 2018, and I had been with the company for I'm going to say 3 years-ish at that point, and then I received a transfer, so I was able to work for it's called Fry's in Arizona, and we moved, and it was an incredible experience. It was one of those things where it was like, hey, we should do something. We should do something kind of exciting and take an adventure. So we sold everything we had, my wife and I, and we just drove two vehicles cross country.
Huge change.
Yeah, it was major. And then we found out we were going to have a baby. And that's kind of when, everything starts shifting a little bit. Your mentality, your mindset's like, okay, well, we're going to have this little human in our lives. So we have to, you start thinking about things. And I was having some troubles with anxiety. And I was diagnosed with chronic anxiety. And I've always wanted to have control of that myself. I've never wanted to rely on something for that. But I was in such a state at that point that I couldn't see where I was. And my health was really going through some problems there for a little bit. So we made the decision to move back. And this is kind of when everything started taking a full 180. I finally had time to kind of see where I had been and then also focus on who I wanted to be for myself and where I wanted to be, not be on someone else's agenda, not be feeling like constrained in a way.
Yeah.
So I started just doing what I enjoyed. I always go back to, I say, I've been doing this since elementary school with friends, and we're always trying to find the humor in things, always trying to make light of situations. And it's just something that's always brought me joy, and to see other people enjoy it too, that's just the best. So my page was kind of like a little photography, but it was all done with my phone. And I enjoy taking pictures and I enjoy creating. And then I started doing the things that I've done with like my wife or my friends. You send them a silly video and I enjoy doing it. And then it's just back and forth. And then I'd always been kind of hesitant for whatever reason, really at time as well. Like I never had time to devote to it because if I do something, I want to do it really well. So I finally had some time to devote to this. And then I was like, oh, this is fun. And then I started messing around with editing. And then I started just trying to be real with it too. And like the things that I'm experiencing in my life and trying to put a little spin on it. Like I'd mentioned, I always have loved music too. So bringing something alive with music and creating like that, it's become more of a passion, but it's always been a passion of mine. So that's how it started. And then it just kind of snowballed and I kept getting positive feedback from it. I'm like, this is so bizarre. I was used to getting, if you talk in terms of like social media world, you get likes, your 15 likes,
Yeah.
100 views, so many views. And then it just kept going and going and going. And then, one of them reached like 500,000 views. And I was like, this is just insane. Like, I can't believe this many people enjoyed watching this thing. And then it just kept growing. And I think at the beginning of the year, I was at maybe a couple thousand followers.
At the beginning of this year.
If I remember correctly, yeah.
Wow.
And it continued to grow and grow and grow.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. Because my time is all off because we all still think it's 2019, but actually it was really only a year ago that the shift happened for you.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I never really knew where I wanted it to go or what I wanted it to be. And I don't really know if I still do or not.
You don't need to.
Yeah, I guess not.
We don't need to know those answers, you know?
Yeah.
I so relate to everything you're saying. I think everybody does. I think that you are really good at saying things out loud that we all think, but we don't know we think until someone else says. You know, those things we all have inside of us?
Sure.
And you're bringing that to the surface. I get the sense that you're very connected to your humanity. You really stuck out for me as this like shining light that brings a lot of joys to my day. Part of inviting you on the show is to be able to thank you for that because look, this show's called The Joyful Life Guide. You know, I've been through hell and back. I'm in the same boat as you are. I am finished with trying to fit myself into some box about where I should be by this point in my life. I'm finished with working for other people and being on other people's agendas. I just want to let myself be authentic. And that's when people respond
Mm.
because it's through those shared experiences that we all connect. And that's why you're taking off and you're just at the beginning. What I love about what you're doing, in addition to everything I just said, is you're a really good actor.
Thank you.
That's why I don't want to call them skits because they're thought out, they're planned, they're fucking clever. I want to ask you, are you an actor? Like you said, you know, you don't have to know where it's going, but do you have goals to take this into the future?
I don't do any of that stuff.
Really?
And no, I've had a couple things here and there. I played a little acoustic set at a coffee shop recently, but I have you know, as far as performing or acting goes, I've never
Wow.
never done anything like that. And I really appreciate you saying that. But like I said, I don't know where it's going or what it could lead to. Just having a blast with it. Yeah.
That's the same with this podcast. You know, it's just an outlet for me to talk to interesting people. I named it the Joyful Life Guide because it's not about happiness. I don't think joy is the same as happiness. I don't know if happiness exists. It's like this blanket statement that we all try to attain and then we can't attain it. And that makes us even more depressed.
Yes.
So that's why I chose the word joyful. I might not always be happy, but I can always find the joy somewhere.
Mhm.
And so I wanted to ask you, what does joy mean to you? And you said you've had this clinically, right, diagnosed depression. Is that what you called it? Anxiety.
It's chronic anxiety.
Chronic
Yeah.
anxiety. I think I should be diagnosed with that as well. So joy is like a way for me to talk about being positive, but not annoying way of like, let's all be happy because it's not that.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So what does joy mean to you? How do you relate to that?
It sounds kind of cliche, but it really is doing what you love and what gives you life. And I think for the longest time, me personally, I wasn't making my own decisions and I wasn't making decisions for myself. I was kind of just led by other things and I really didn't have a plan. And I don't really know if I do now, but it just seems like a different situation because I'm more in control. So joy for me is doing that thing that you love because you can fail at doing something that you love or you can fail at doing something that you don't love. And I think that I was in a position where I wasn't really considering that or I wasn't really considering myself as much as I was other things that didn't need that type of attention. So I think that simplicity for me too is what brings me joy. And then also taking, you know, what you have, your talents, you as a person, and trying to give with that or using that. So what I'm doing right now, and I really appreciated you saying like how it may bring a little joy in your life. You know, that's what I can do right now. That's what I have the resources for. And that's what, you know, I enjoy doing, just trying to spread that a little bit.
Hmm. Wow. So was there music in the house growing up?
Yes, my dad plays guitar. As long as I can remember, he would have people over to play in the garage. And then I got my first guitar at 13 for Christmas.
Wow.
So I'm left-handed and he's right-handed. So I would play on his guitar before I had my own. I had it flipped around, strung
Oh my God.
upside down for me. But yeah, the influence was definitely there, and I have always been a fan of music for as long as I can remember. It's one of those things that it just gave me, I call it the chill factor. It ranges from all different kinds.
Wow. It sounds like you taught yourself.
A little bit, yeah. My dad taught me just basic power chords and showed me how to read tablature. And then I took some lessons from a guy in high school and just kind of went from there. But it's one of those things where that's what I looked forward to. Like throughout the day, I'd be in high school and I'd be in class, and I would just kind of want to get home so I could be in my room and play along to my CDs. I had my CD player.
I have a big CD collection. I had a big, thick book. I've lost them. I am sick about it. Ugh.
Yeah. Yeah, I had my first, I think, CD was
What was your
Creed.
first? Creed?
Creed, and I always make jokes about Creed. I don't know what it is about Creed. I've always really loved Creed.
They sing with arms wide open.
With arms wide open. Yeah.
I can't believe I got that right.
Yeah, no, that was perfect. But then we had my brother, 6 years older than me, loved Metallica, Guns N' Roses, Pearl Jam, like the grunge and the rock scene.
My
Uh,
first CD was Dookie, Green Day's Dookie.
yeah, oh yeah.
And I had to like get an older kid to buy it for me because it was explicit.
Yeah.
My mom wouldn't allow it in the house, so I had to listen to it at night under the covers with my Walkman.
That's so funny.
That and The Offspring were like such bad lyrics.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember the Walkman too. I remember
Now
having the
the Walkman
cassette.
at night
Yeah.
under the covers.
So I had the cassette that would have the songs taped from the radio.
All right.
So you would have like the end of a song, and then you'd hear 103.1 The Bear, and then you get that little clip right at the end of it, and then the next song is like 10 seconds into it because you hit record too slowly.
Tape over old mixes that you didn't want anymore. So there's
Yeah,
other jumbled music also. It's just like
yeah, yeah. It was just a mess of music, but
it was
uh,
so magic though, because it was like you had curated it. And you can do that on Spotify now, but I'm so grateful that we got that experience when we were growing up.
it was that moment you heard those first couple notes come into that song that you knew that you had been waiting for.
Oh, I know.
That's a great feeling.
I know. It really was magical. It really was. Wow. What was your first concert?
My mom drove me there, and it was an old band called Oleander, Three Doors Down, and Fuel. That was my first concert.
Oh my,
And I remember my mom, she's so sweet. We were just sitting there next to each other, and I saw some people that I knew, and I went down, I sat with them, I look up, and she's just having the best swaying back and forth, listening to her Three Doors Down, and that was my date. So
oh, that's so sweet.
that was a really cool experience because that was the first time I'd seen, I guess you would call them, they were celebrities to me. I mean, they were a big deal.
Wow. Okay. So you're growing up in Ohio in this small, lovely place, I'm sure, and you're loving your music. Did you have any ideas about doing that as a career, or what did you feel like you wanted to do when you grew up? And were you happy with that country life, or did you crave like moving to a city, or what did you feel growing up there?
So it kind of goes back to not really having a plan, not really considering the future as much as, being in those moments. I think that can be good, and it can also be, counterproductive in a way. But no, I never knew what I wanted to do, but I don't think I ever really realized that those were the things that I wanted to do. To play the music, or I've been a huge fan of Saturday Night Live, and I never would have considered, that being a career. I don't think that that's the mentality from where I grew up. That's not an option. It's kind of you grow up and you learn a trade or you go to college, and those are kind of the options.
That's right.
And those are both great things to do. I played baseball and basketball in high school, and I was playing in a league over the summer, and I had a scout come and see me, and he's like, "You're gonna come to college and play baseball." And I was like,
God.
"Okay." I was like, I hadn't thought about it. It was close to home, so I could commute, but that's how that path was chosen for me.
Wow.
And it's just something that I just thought, well, this is easy, so I guess
This
I'll do
makes
it.
sense.
This makes sense.
Well, it goes
And-
back to what you said about valuing simplicity. Like, I just wrote a book called Remember Me as Human.
Mhm.
And it's about the final 3 days that I spent with my grandmother in her nursing home before she died.
Yeah.
And this book takes place in Illinois, Champaign-Urbana, Illinois. And I come
Mhm.
from generations of farmers. And it really is such a simpler life than we know today. And there is so much beauty and blessing in that.
Mhm.
In the book, I'm interviewing her and I ask her if she ever wanted to travel. And she goes, no, why would I travel? I have everything I need right here. Sometimes we look at people we consider like simple-minded in these tiny lives, and we judge them for not wanting more for themselves. But to be content with the way things are is a real blessing. And I can kind of hear that and sense that in the way that you were raised, and you've carried that over into your adult life. I think it's something to really value and hang on to. Like, we overcomplicate our lives to the point that we're very anxious and depressed. I
Mhm.
definitely suffer from that.
I think that's a really good point. And sometimes, we look at things a certain way that we don't quite understand. And if you're in that position that you don't know what that life is, or the other direction where you're terrified to leave your home, or you're terrified to travel or do something like that, or you just don't want to. Like, either way, it's kind of like, one of those things. If you don't quite understand it, it's hard. I think that after college, I had a desire to go. I had the itch. So
Wow, did you know where for, or did another invitation come along that just felt right?
So I came across an opportunity, and at this point I was living in a tiny one-bedroom apartment in West Virginia, and I had nothing tying me down. I saw something where I could go teach English in China.
Oh my
And
God.
I was like, let's go. Like, never left the country before.
As far
For
as you can get from
Yeah, I
home.
know, literally as far as I could go.
But most people in the US, and this is a shocking statistic, which I don't have on hand right now, but I researched it recently. So many Americans do not have a passport.
I believe it. Yeah.
I mean, we just take it for granted, but why would,
Yeah.
like my grandma said, why would I leave? I don't.
Well, exactly. I had to go through all that process once I made this decision.
Your parents shocked?
They were. I think everyone kind of was. That's when I was started making those decisions for myself. It was scary,
Yeah.
but it was something that I wanted to do. And I got certified, hopped on a plane, flew into, I can't remember the name of the city I flew into, but I was in Shaoxing, and I taught at a university called UHU, and I had about 45, 50 kids per class, and I had 7 classes per week, and I loved it. I loved the experience. I loved the difference. Everyone was so incredibly friendly to me. Any fears that I had for that shift or transition were gone once I was there.
Were there many
But
Chinese people in your hometown?
no,
Right.
no, there's really, not much diversity at all in the area.
So you went
We're
from all white people to being the only white person.
pretty much, yeah. Yeah, I knew no one, and I stuck out like a sore thumb. I mean,
Fabulous. I bet you've just felt so free and excited and thrilled by that total opposite of everything you'd known.
I did, but right before I left, I met this girl.
Oh,
And it's always the
plot
story.
thickens.
Right before I left. So I kid you not, I had this plan, everything, the wheels were in motion. I was finally in China. I was there, and I'm like, man, I gotta, I gotta marry that girl.
Wow.
So that is my now wife of 10 years.
Oh my
But
God.
I joke with her that she ruined all
She
my plans.
ruined your life in China.
Ruined the plans. Come on.
How long were you in China?
6 months. So I taught for a semester.
Had you kept in touch with her during that time?
Oh yeah, the whole time.
Yeah. Okay. So you knew it was a done deal.
One of those things.
Yeah.
You just knew.
It's
And
so
if
simple when it shows up, isn't it?
it absolutely is, and usually at the most inconvenient time,
Oh,
but
I know. It's always
that's how it works.
it's the worst.
I heard one of my friends told me one time, if you're going to move on, you have to be content with where you are to be able to move forward with something. And
So true.
I think that, there was finally some contentment there. And then I was like, oh, there's this opportunity. Oh, I can't, it's one of those things you just know. So I came back, we got married, and that's when I just happened into a job that was available. Not necessarily something that would have been my first choice, but it was something that I found. And I was like, maybe for a little while I'll do this. And then however many years later, I think 8 years later, I was still there. And it was just, I was living for those moments of, again, it was kind of like being at school and just being like, man, I just want to be home and like playing my guitar or doing something, creating in some way. And there was that kind of restriction there. So, over time, it just became what, again, I thought it was supposed to be or expected. Then it just wore on me over time, but I didn't see it. When you're in it, you don't really have that room or that headspace to understand like, where you are. And then you step away from it and you're like, oh, wow, that was a little too much. So
Yeah, and the body tells you, right? Like your body is going to force you to stop or change something. And is that during the time that you said you started getting really sick?
well, it was over time.
Getting worn down is such a gradual process, like the frog in hot water that's slowly boiling. You just can't feel it happening until you're forced to stop. So, did you have to go to the hospital or anything?
Multiple times, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think one day at work, my blood pressure was like 200 over 100 and something, like just absurd. I was in such a heightened state with my body,
Yeah.
and I would drink more caffeine, and I would think that, oh gosh, this will be the solution. And then I would work like a 12-hour shift, and then I would come home and just be so incredibly drained, and then go back and then work like, you know, 12 days in a row. And just like I look back at it now and I'm like, wow, that's just not that was not good.
It's not sustainable. It's really unfair to do to ourselves, but we do it so often. We all do it. Everyone listening is doing it in one way or another in their own life.
I met so many incredible people on that journey too. So, taking away the good things from that
Yeah.
is definitely something to kind of look back on and be like, the people that I could help during that too, whether it be, working the HR position and trying to help someone with their career get started or lead them in the right direction. Like there were a lot of great opportunities too. So I never try to forget that. A lot of great things came of it too.
You got a good head on your shoulders, Mr. Ron DeLancey.
Thank you.
You really do. That's a superpower to not just black and white everything. That's a childish way to come at life, not things aren't black and white. Everything is a spectrum and it's not compartmentalized and there's always positive to take from every situation, as painful as it might have been. And we don't take it seriously, the connection between mental and physical health, that the mental comes out in the body as symptoms. I believe. I believe that the physical symptoms are directly from your mental state and your psychological state and your spiritual state.
It was for me. That was definitely my experience. And So many people go through so many different things and so many different illnesses. And, I always try to want to respect that when sharing my experience. But it was, hey, you need to go see a cardiologist right now type situation. And for the cardiologist to say, you just can't keep on this path because in his words, it's not going to end well for you. That's a wake up call right
Oh,
there. If
God.
you're in a position, but if there's something that you can do about it, that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to do something about it. I hadn't up to that point, again, just because I was kind of going through the motions and
Yeah.
just kind of letting life direct me a little bit.
Right. So what would you say to somebody who's suffering like in the same position that you were at your lowest? Swooped in and saved yourself? Because that's what it feels like, right? I've been in that low, low, low point, and in a certain instance, it felt like a spiritual SWAT team was swooping in. And whether it's those words coming from a doctor, this is not going to end well for you, or for me, like a stalker showed up in my life and it was a near death experience that really forced me to look at where I was at and make some changes. It was me saving myself, which ultimately it has to be. No one else can do it for you. You've got to make that switch. So, for someone who hasn't had that click yet, what do you want to say? Because you're an expert now.
Well, yeah, that's a great question. And I definitely had all of the support from my wife too. I don't think that she was going to sit back and let something go further too.
Yeah.
So anyone in a situation like that, I try to I stopped practicing self-care. I stopped paying attention to my diet, and I stopped paying attention to my social life really. And all of these things are just so incredibly important. I mean, if you just are in this constant rotation or this constant loop, I think I stopped looking at myself a little bit because I didn't like what I was seeing at times.
You abandoned yourself.
Yeah, and in the same sense, we all do what we have to do. Work is work. I would go in and I would just try to make the most of it, and I would have a great day. And you would feel good in that moment, but like you said, over time it just kind of eats at you and eats at you and eats at you, and then it builds up and then it becomes this thing. So
Yeah, it's not sustainable.
mhm.
It's just not. Like the doctor said, this is not going to end well for you.
Yeah. And I really don't have a lot of advice when it comes to something like that, I think, because there was just that turning point for me, really.
I mean, it's
So
personal for all of us, isn't it?
true.
It's hard to kind of give blanket statements about it, but what I hear you saying is that you had abandoned yourself in a lot of ways because you didn't want to deal with it and you didn't like yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
And then when we feel that way, then it becomes even more overwhelming. It's like when you say you're going to call someone and then you don't call them, and then you feel guilty that you didn't call them, so then it turns into weeks, and then it just gets worse and worse, and then you never want to speak to them again, and then you cut them off as a friend. All because you didn't do what you said you were going to do. And it's like when a problem gets that out of hand, we want to run away from it. And when it's for the self, it's hard to turn yourself back towards yourself and reapproach yourself in a new way and save yourself. Feels hopeless at a certain point. Like it's just too much trouble. It's just too big a problem. And I think people get so overwhelmed by understanding how to save themselves that's why we bury ourselves in work that we hate, and relationships that aren't fulfilling, and abusive patterns, and alcohol, and social media, and all these insane distractions because we're trying to outrun ourselves.
Yeah, I think outrun is a great word. And really it was, there was that realization, and there was the effort needed on my part to change the situation. But also, like I think that ultimately my body just decided you're done. Like this is it. And like just physically just couldn't really take it anymore. And we're so connected. And you mentioned the mental aspect as well. I think it's not only being at work, but then being connected at work basically 24 hours a day. And you have your phone in your pocket and you're getting text messages and you're getting emails and you're worried and you're like, oh, should I do this or this or this? And it's just, I don't think we realize how endless it is, and or it can be if we let it. And I guess that would be something that I would have told my past self, is to make sure that you put some restrictions on that.
Yes.
Like make sure that you are, again, practicing that self-care and taking time for yourself and separating yourself from this thing that is like seems to just have a hold of you.
Of course, this is a lifelong process. We will be practicing self-care until the day we die. But with where you're at now, what are some of those restrictions and boundaries that you have in place that you know are important for you? Especially being a star on a viral star now, your phone. And that's the tricky thing, right? I run my business from my phone as well. And so do you. And you can make a lot of money doing that. And you have to be the one who shuts it off at the end of the day.
Yeah, and that's you can be in control, but again, that's a great point. Like you have to make that decision. So when are you going to turn it off? Because still, it can be a 24-hour thing, just like, any other position. So I think that I had the realization at one point when I was really caught up in something. I was trying to work, and my son said, he's 2.5, and he said, "Daddy, stop working." And it's just that moment where it's like, oh man, that's not the example that I want to set for him. We do our best to promote as much as we can for him, being outside, playing outside, try to limit the screen time and everything. So for me to be setting that example is something that I don't want to do. So I've definitely set limits. The difference is I really enjoy it. So it's like
Me too.
creating and
Thing.
editing. Yeah, it's actually something that I want to do. So that's where the difference is. I could allow myself to edit and try to make this better and try to one up myself continuously.
Me too, man.
But it is a lot of work.
Yeah, it
And
is very time consuming.
yeah, but it's fun. So it's like that's the difference in even both situations. If I worked a 12-hour day doing something that I didn't enjoy doing, as opposed to a 12-hour day where I'm just having a blast the whole time, I may not even be working less. I may even be working more, but it's giving me that life.
Exactly. It's the same energy either way, which I think was your point with it in the beginning. That they say, like the book Rich Dad, Poor Dad says, it's the same energy used to make $1 as it is to make $1 million. It's the same energy. So people go, oh, I don't want to start taking piano lessons because it'll take me too long to learn. Well, the time's going to go by anyway, and the energy is no different than if you devote it to doing some crap thing that you hate. It's the same thing. You have to get connected to that joy and demand that in your life, And when you do, you won't be willing to settle for less. You'll want everything to taste delicious, because life should be a delicious meal. Yeah, like you said, of course we have to work. Everybody has to work. And sometimes we have to do things that are like not that great, but you got to get behind what it's bringing you. And if you can't, and I know this is a spicy viewpoint, but I say if you can't get behind what you're doing in every aspect of your life, it doesn't belong anymore. Because the things that do taste delicious to you will swoop in to fill the space. People don't trust that, because they were raised a certain way. They have all these concepts, these beliefs in their head about what life is supposed to be and what you're supposed to do to have a successful life and all this crap. And it's like, comes down to question your beliefs. Like, what are your beliefs? Are they even yours? Or were they passed down by family who you don't want your life to look anything like their life? But you're walking around governing your own life with these beliefs that don't even belong to you. Don't get me started, Ron. Don't get me going.
Absolutely. And I really do think that, just going back to it, that realization when you start making decisions for yourself.
Yeah.
That's
it.
That's a game changer.
That
is everything. And then I've made jokes in some of the reels that being 40, you care less about what other people think of you or the opinions of others,
Yeah.
or someone trying to tell you you should do something a certain way. I think that wisdom does come with age sometimes, but I do think that there was that turning point for me, and it wasn't necessarily 40 maybe, but it was just this point in my life. So, what you'd mentioned before about, talking to people about how to come out of this, or if they're experiencing something similar to my experience, is that I feel like my life has just kind of started at 40. And I never, you don't think of that as an opportunity. And that's kind of partially some of the jokes are that we do, is that it's almost comical to think sometimes that you're too old. I think in a way, because you could wake up tomorrow, cut all of your hair off, do whatever you wanted to do with your appearance, and you could just change everything overnight. And I think that that's something that I had not known or had forgotten through many different points in my life, and just thought, well, I'm on this path, I have to stay here.
That's what I mean about questioning our beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
So they aren't who you really are. They're just these things that you've collected, and you could completely change them tomorrow. It's so trippy when you really realize that and start to make your own decisions. I love what you're saying. I think it's so helpful for people. Just want to say about what you said about your son. It's really, really powerful because he was telling you something in that moment about him too.
I think he was kind of saying that maybe he felt as though the phone were more important than him in that
Exactly.
moment.
Yeah.
And I never want that. I
Yeah.
never want him to have those feelings. And, I always want there to be a safety there with communication with us. And, the fact that he was able to say, hey, can you put that down? Stop working. Like, I'm happy he was able to do that,
Yeah.
but I just don't want it to, that's where you kind of catch yourself and you're like, okay, that's one of those things. I don't think that was okay.
Yeah, it's amazing. And he was saying, "Hey, Dad, I want to spend more time with you.
Mm.
Let's go do stuff. Let's bro out. Let's be together." Amazing. Children are just, they'll set you right.
Oh, yeah.
They'll fuck you up, man. I was curious about any other positive restrictions and boundaries you have in place. Do you work out? Do you have a specific diet? What are your sleep habits like? Any other things that you can share with people?
Yes, it's a lifestyle. It's a daily thing. Diet is incredibly important to me. That's one of the things that I found interesting enough to try to study and learn more about. I've gone through a lot with challenging my body. I still run as often as I can, maybe 4 times a week. We still work out with free weights, but the diet is something that it's just so interesting. It's taken me a while to find out what works best for me personally and what makes me feel the best, and things that I try to avoid. The more natural, the better.
Yeah, what works specifically for you?
So whole foods really, and then other stuff sparingly. So I have a really bad sweet tooth, honestly. So I try to get creative with that. One of our skits we did, I talked about just my newfound love for dates, because they curb that sweet craving, and you can have them before bed, and they have fiber and all of these things. But trying to find like ways there's so many ways to enjoy yourself with food. And through college and in my 20s, it was just straight fast food and beer. And it's just, I just lived on that. And I was fine. I think I was fine anyway. Who knows what that did to my body? No, now I kind of look at, how I used to go about that. And there's a realization that, oh, I didn't need to feel miserable in those moments, or oh, that was probably the reason that I felt a certain way. It wasn't just that I was tired, but I was living on like candy for however long and my body wasn't fueled properly.
Yeah.
So we definitely try to be mindful of those things. So health is an extremely important part of our lives. And that's also just because of like when you're in a certain state, or you realize you may be sick, or it's anything, you realize, oh, I can't do anything without my health.
That's right. And I did the same thing. I was in the depths of depression and I had a feeling that my diet was really affecting me. And I called a friend of mine, Autumn Smith, who owns the company Paleo Valley. I actually just had her on the episode before this. And I called her, this was 2018, and I said, I need you to help me. I can't go on like this. I'm not going to make it, and I'm really afraid. And we started with me cutting out bread, sugar, and caffeine. That change cleared my mind for a moment so that I could even think properly because we're being poisoned by the food in this country. And that's a huge conversation. But that poison keeps us dumb. You just can't do things the way you used to anymore.
No, not at all. And it's you don't really, I don't want to as much either.
I don't want
So
to either.
yeah, my mind is understanding now, hey, if what's the payoff here? That's not as much of a reward. The taste of this isn't as much of a reward as feeling good would be. I feel like in my life it was kind of obvious what I should have been doing for me personally, but I was ignoring it for whatever other reasons. So
Do you drink anymore?
very, very little. That's another thing that it's really not helping me. So I just sound I don't know how I sound, but I would just prefer to be hydrated, get a good night's sleep.
This is the genius thing that you're doing is you're taking all this and you're putting it into your comedy
Right.
because these are what all your sketches are about. Everything we've touched on, you're finding really great ways to share that. All right, so I've got two last questions for you. The first one is if you had the ultimate dinner party, who would you invite? Anyone in the world, dead or alive?
Oh my goodness. That's a great one. Let me think on this one for just a second.
Are you trying not to say controversial people?
No, no, I just anyone that I would really actually want to sit down. You know, I would probably want to sit down and have dinner and a conversation with my ancestors. So where I came from.
Yeah.
So if it's going to be my great 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 grandpa or my great, I always have this thought that it would be so fun to be able to spend time with a grandparent or great grandparent when they're like your age or they're younger in their 20s, just to see what they were like.
Yeah.
That would be so cool. Like my grandma, I lived with my grandma for a while and we would always just have so much fun together and we'd play cards and she was so funny. And I think that eventually I'm going to do maybe a skit on her the way I have my mom, and my mom is just the best too. So it's like, but they were just so animated. It's so easy to kind of have their mannerisms. But I always thought it would be so fun to sit down with my grandma, and she was 92 when she passed, but her and I to have a conversation when she was like 30 years old. That would just be so cool.
Amazing. God, I know. And it's so wild to think that we really can only see back into the shadows of our lineage just a couple generations.
Mhm.
Imagine like your 10th great grandfather, like 1,000 years ago.
That's so fun to think about because it would be, you have this image of people in history, and it would be so fun if like, they just had similar like quirks or
I know.
mannerisms that
You
you
think,
do.
what if I look just like my eighth
Yeah.
grandmother and I'll never know?
Yeah. Yeah. Or they had some type of annoying habit that you have maybe, or like I would be this historical moment where I get to speak to, however many generations or a great, 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 great grandpa, and he's like smacking his food when he, chews or something. And I'm like, oh gosh, you do that too?
That's where I got that from.
Yeah.
Exactly. Oh, I love that. That would be so fascinating. We're probably all related because we're all ultimately Irish. So we're all cousins anyway. Where's your,
Mhm.
do you have Irish roots or are you from?
I think DeLancey is French.
Oh, yes, of course. Excuse me. Yes. Yes, Delancey's definitely French. Do you know that you came from France at some point?
No, I haven't really looked into it, but the older I get, I definitely become, more fascinated by it. So I think that's just a matter of time before I go down that
Yeah.
rabbit hole, try to track everything down.
Well, I can't wait for these sketches about your grandmother and your and your other family members. I can't wait for the wigs that are going to happen.
Yeah, I think I've already got a couple ready to go, but the one thing my grandma would always do, she would be in her room watching TV with her hand up like this because she couldn't hear very well up to her ear. And I would say, "Hey, Grandma." And I would come around the corner. She wouldn't hear me. And then she would turn around and get really startled. And it was always we would laugh about it. It was just always, so that's something I can envision of like trying to recreate.
Yeah, that's hilarious. My grandma would watch Jeopardy with like a magnifying screen,
Yeah.
a flimsy, like, this magnifying screen, and she'd set it up in front of the television, and then she'd be like, right up, look, so
He
funny.
was just dialed in,
Just
invested.
dialed in, man. All about it. All about it.
That's one thing that I experienced. I did one as my mom, and I've done a couple, and it was just almost emotional for me to put myself in that character and then be doing the things that I saw her do when we were younger and kind of be, in that headspace. And I was like, wow, what a great woman.
Wow. That's really beautiful and powerful. And I'm going to make sure that everybody knows where to follow you and stay up on what you're doing. Because if you haven't seen what Ron does yet, you are in for a treat. You are absolutely going to love it, and you have to follow him immediately. Where can everybody keep up with you?
So we are on Instagram, de.lan.cey. And then TikTok is just Ron DeLancey. And then Facebook is Ron DeLancey as well.
I want to end on what you just said about your family and tying them into what you're creating, because my takeaways from it are we don't need to know where we're going. We just need to take the next step that feels good. And through expressing ourselves one foot in front of the other like that, it's therapeutic for us. Me writing this book, I used it as a therapeutic way to mark my journey as a human. And for you, bringing in your grandmother as a character or your mom as a character is like for you first. If other people get a kick out of it, that's great. I got to have a conversation with Mel Gibson about Braveheart. That movie to me is like the reason I became an actor. And as a musician, I've learned every note in the entire score. That movie has meant more to me than any other movie. And I had a chance to thank him for making it. And you know what he said to me? The same kind of thing that you're saying. He said, I just made Braveheart to entertain myself. And that's it. But to me, that's a successful life. And I think you said that in another way earlier.
Yeah, I think that throughout my life, I've tried to do what I'm doing now, regardless of what I'm doing. So I have always tried to make other people laugh. And selfishly, it brings me joy. And the best times with your friends are when you're just laughing hysterically. You can't even speak because you're laughing at the most ridiculous thing. And that's the connection that I have with my friends now. I have friends that I have a group chat with that we keep in touch, and we've been in touch since high school. And it's just constantly just like, back and forth of who can be more creative, who can one up the other, make the other laugh more. And we just, it's such a beautiful thing to be able to incorporate that in whatever you're doing. And like I said, with that job that I had, there were a lot of negatives, but there were those moments of human connection that I would have. And it was like, try to break away from this mentality or this mindset that this thing right now, the cleanliness of the floors, is the most important thing in the world, because it's not. Break away from that. Like how are you doing? A genuine conversation with people. I'm thankful that I was in a position to be able to do that as well.
Yeah, you are having a beautiful conversation with people in your social media stuff, and it does feel like an extension of friendship. So I can't wait for everybody to discover you if they haven't already.
And I've so enjoyed talking to you and getting to know you. I look forward to meeting you in person.
This has been an honor.
Yeah.
It's been fun. Thank you for your time. I know you are incredibly busy as well, so just that you took a moment to speak to me, it means a lot. So thank you.
Lots of love. Bye, everybody.
Thank you for being with us for this episode. Connect with Ron now on socials, Instagram, de.lan.cey, and TikTok, Ron DeLancey. You can also connect with me, the Lucy Walsh, and join my virtual coaching programs from wherever you are in the world at lucywalsh.com. Thank you so much for taking a moment to rate, share, review, and like this podcast. Bye for now.